Hello, welcome to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading 1 Samuel chapter 16. I am re-recording this video. There are some things that I think should have been structured better in the first video. And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, How can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, Take an heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will shew thee what thou shalt do, and thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. And Samuel did that which the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, Comest thou peaceably? And he said peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass when they were come, that he looked on Eliab, and said, Surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab, and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass by. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Again, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, The Lord hath not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said unto him, Behold now, an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. Let our Lord now command thy servants, which are before thee, to seek out a man who is a cunning player on an harp. And it shall come to pass, when the evil spirit from God is upon thee, that he shall play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. And Saul said unto his servants, Provide me now a man that can play well, and bring him to me. Then answered one of the servants, and said, Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person. And the Lord is with him. Wherefore Saul sent messengers unto Jesse, and said, Send me David thy son, which is with the sheep. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread, and a bottle of wine, and a kid, and sent them by David his son unto Saul. And David came to Saul, and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp, and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed, and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. Okay, so I am re-recording the video because I think the content could have been structured better. I was prompted to begin organizing these messages better by having more text on the screen, but I wanted to speak from memory. Brought me to the conclusion that ample speech without God's direct command results in error. The goal is biblical adherence to develop discernment. This is how we learn to follow God's voice. In order to follow God's voice, we need to know who God is, and we learn who God is by reading his word. So it's just very important to always be referencing the Bible, always be looking back at the Bible. An example of ample speech without God's direct command is the book of Deuteronomy. The entire book is of Moses talking, so I am critical about this book being referenced as having information to apply to my life personally because God is not commanding anything. So in Deuteronomy chapter 3 and chapter 4, Moses tells Israel that he's not able to go to Canaan because of them. And so this is incorrect because in Numbers chapter 20, 27, and Deuteronomy chapter 32, God specifically tells Moses that what happened in Numbers chapter 20 is the reason why he can't go into Canaan. And what happened in chapter 20, God asked Moses to speak to a rock, and instead he hid it. So Moses has done a ton of questionable things until now, and this was like the final straw. So this is a detail that I did not mentioned clearly the first time I made this upload. Exodus 17, this is the first time God asked Moses to get water from a rock. So God asked Moses to do this twice. The first time was in Exodus 17, the second time was in Numbers 20. Exodus 17, God told Moses to hit the rock. And Numbers 20, God told Moses to speak to the rock. So King Saul's story begins in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Israel made a request to have control over their leadership, and this is huge. Is huge. The reason why this is huge is because Israel, they are not equipped to have control over their leadership just yet. We have to remember that they are just getting out of slavery. They've not used to having any control over their life, controlling how society is supposed to look, or having any economic influence. So, as a slave, slaves experience contact only through being exploited. So, this is an imbalanced scenario. God had to deliver them into the wilderness. He gives them customs, laws, and traditions that serve as a foundation for a kingdom centered around God. So before they can get a territory and resources, they have to have some sort of ideas, some sort of laws, customs, code of conduct that will help them see the benefit of acting as a group, acting as a unit. The thing is, because they're a new group of people, they have to build this. And so the reason why this is such a big deal is because they're not at a point where they're established enough to be able to control their own leadership. They still need God, a leader that's going to be a pipeline to God. And what they're about to do is have a leader and then have an intermediary or a priest. And that's not what God wanted. Israel was in Egypt for 430 years. We see that in Exodus 12. The Bible is not clear how long the enslavement lasted. This is another detail that I did not get correct. We don't know if they were enslaved for 400 years. We just know that they were in Egypt for 430 years. And part of that dwelling in Egypt was Joseph and his father, Jacob/Israel. Joseph was the one who had the coat of many colors. Uh, he was sold to an Egyptian. He earned his way up into being second in command in Egypt, and he was able to ration the food. He invited his family to live there during a famine, and that's how Israel got to Egypt. So in Exodus 1, that generation of Israel dies. The Pharaoh that accepted him dies. A new Pharaoh gets into Egypt, and he begins to fear all these foreigners because if they decide to revolt, they can take over the country. So he enslaves them, hoping that it will start to kill them off or lessen their population. It doesn't. So he tries to start killing off the Hebrew males so that they can't reproduce. And that doesn't work either. So he creates a law that every male should be thrown in the river. Moses' mother creates an ark for him. The Pharaoh's daughter finds him and raises him as her own. So Moses is not socialized as a Hebrew. He got to live the life of an Egyptian. So that makes it even more significant that he had this level of loyalty to the Israelites. Exodus 12, Israel left Egypt and lived in the wilderness. From the book of Exodus to the book of Numbers, God gives traditions and laws to give Israel a way to build community, which is the foundation for a kingdom. In Numbers 13, God tries to give Israel land to begin building a kingdom, but the people that were born into slavery were not capable enough. So in Numbers 14, God tells them that the people that are 20 and over will die in the wilderness over the course of 40 years. By the time we get to Numbers 26, those 40 years have passed, and Moses takes a census. The entire book of Deuteronomy is Moses talking to this generation that has emerged in Numbers 26, giving them information about how they should behave. Okay. He also recants their history. The entire book of Joshua details Israel moving into Canaan and the land acquisition. Judges chapter 1 details where the tribes of Israel settled and the tribes that they did not drive out. In Judges chapter 2, this was a problem because we just said they were a very new group of people. So this new group of people has not they don't have an established culture, established religion. They, their minds are still, you know, getting out of that slave mentality because now this is the generation that's been taught by their slave parents. So this being such a new group of independent people going into a land where people have been practicing idol worship for hundreds of years, they have an established culture, they have established currency, it's going to influence them negatively if they don't already have this attitude that they're going to reject that lifestyle. For one, you think about how these societies are probably built. They're probably developed. They probably have elaborate buildings and castles and the Israelites are coming in and they don't have all that. Now they have a belief in God. They've seen God do some things, but as far as having this wealth, having this kingdom that looks like a kingdom, they don't have that. And they don't even know what that looks like other than what they've seen other people have. This is why they were supposed to have a specific attitude to drive those people away, but they didn't. Judges chapter 2, an angel asked Israel, why did they not complete the instructions given to them? The book of Judges details leaders that judge Israel or that are leaders in Israel until Samson in Judges chapter 16. After Samson's death, there are no more leaders in the book of Judges. We don't see any more judges mentioned until we get to the book of Samuel. Ruth is a story that occurs during Judges, and Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 starts out saying that this story occurred during the time of Judges. First Samuel chapter 1, Samuel is born. He is sent to live with Eli in the temple as he is a miracle child for his mother Hannah. First Samuel chapter 2, Eli, the priest, he is the judge right now, but he's also, he's again also in the church. But he has wayward sons who are dishonoring their position as a priest's son or a leader's son. They were interfering with the offering rituals, they were sleeping with the women. A visitor prophesies that both of Eli's sons would die on the same day. First Samuel chapter 3. This is the famous story of young Samuel thinking that he's hearing Eli calling him, and he tells Samuel, the next time you hear him, tell him, speak, for I'm listening. And God confirms to Samuel that he's going to judge Eli for not disciplining his sons. First Samuel chapter 4. Israel goes to war with the Philistines. They are losing and they get the Ark of the Covenant. They lose miserably. Eli and his sons die. Eli's daughter-in-law dies, and then the ark gets taken by the Philistines. First Samuel chapter 5. The Philistines send the Ark of the Covenant to three Philistine territories. Terrible plagues occur. Chapter 6. After 7 months, the Philistines deliver the Ark of the Covenant back to the Israelites. First Samuel chapter 6, verse 19. There is a discrepancy because some of the men who are Israelites looked in the covenant and died. There's a discrepancy on how many men, 70 or 50,070. If you go to BibleRef.com and you type in 1 Samuel 6:19 and you click On it, you will see 7 translations, and you will see some of them will have these 2 different numbers. First Samuel chapter 7. Israel genuinely adheres to God's laws and they reject idol worship. When they go to war with the Philistines this time, they're prosperous. First Samuel chapter 8. Israel demands a change in leadership. Samuel's wayward sons were perverting justice and accepting bribes. This is another piece of information that I got incorrect. Um, Samuel's sons were perverting justice, accepting bribes. They were not interfering with the offerings and they were not sleeping with the women. That was Eli's sons. So, again, having that information in front of me, it helps me to keep those details separated because this is a lot of information. The issue with Israel wanting leadership that reflects those around them, they were supposed to destroy these people in Judges chapter 1 and 2. In Judges chapter 2, verse 18, the Bible tells us that God was appointing these judges. Judges chapter 9, King Abimelech was the first king of Israel. He was a complete psychopath that went mad with power. He killed 70 of his brothers so that he can become king. That's their first king, and they want another king. Leviticus 18, God explained that these nations that God is giving Israel a favor so that they can conquer. The reason why God is giving them favor is because they're making the land sick with their practices. So for them to want leaders or leadership that reflects these other people, I mean, it's just insane. You've already had a king that was a psychopath. You were supposed to get rid of these people around you, but now you want to be like them. In First Samuel chapter 8, verse 7, God views Israel's decision as rejecting him. Chapter 9, God chooses Saul to be Israel's new king. Chapter 10, Saul is anointed privately. His role is announced publicly. He hides when the ceremony begins and he's forced to participate. Chapter 11, Saul leads Israel to a successful victory against the Ammonites, and the Ammonites are the inbred children of Lot and his daughters. First Samuel chapter 12. In a public ceremony, Samuel gives Israel an opportunity to voice any grievances with leadership. Everyone agrees Samuel's been a fair leader. First Samuel chapter 13, Saul's second year as king, his son Jonathan attacks a Philistine military structure with 1,000 men. The Philistines are outraged. Many men in the Israelite army hide because they're outnumbered. Saul makes an unauthorized burnt sacrifice in an attempt to gain the confidence of the Israelite army. First Samuel 14, Jonathan and his assistants sneak away to successfully defeat the Philistines. The victory restored courage in the men of Israel. The men who ran to hide in the previous chapter realigned themselves with this army, um, with this army. Even the Hebrews that joined the Philistine army joined the Israelites under Saul's rule. In verse 45, the men of Israel credit Jonathan for restoring hope and defeating the Philistines. And then we learn at the end that King Saul spends his reign leading Israel to multiple wars. Chapter 15, this details the information given in 1 Samuel 14:48. God commands Israel to destroy the Amalekites completely, and these are Esau's offspring with a Canaanite woman in Genesis 36. Saul did not obey. He allowed the Amalekite king to live and allowed Israel to keep the best animals from the Amalekites. Samuel confronted him, and Saul begrudgingly confesses that he feared the Israelites in verse 24, which is why he didn't obey God. Samuel is angry. He cuts King Agag to pieces. He refuses to visit Saul again, and God regrets making Saul king. Now we get to 1 Samuel 16. God tells Samuel to go to Bethlehem and to anoint a new king of Israel. To avoid suspicion from Saul, God advises Samuel to bring a cow and make a burnt offering in Bethlehem. God leads Samuel to invite Jesse and asks him to introduce his sons. God reveals David to be the new king and Saul anoints him. Saul begins to suffer an affliction that his servants determine is an evil spirit from God. They employed David as Saul's harp player. David has a reputation as a skilled musician. David's music relieved King Saul of his ailment. God tells Samuel that he wants him to appoint a new king for Israel. In verse 2, Samuel is concerned with Saul's retaliation. So God tells Samuel to take a cow to a man named Jesse in Bethlehem and make a sacrifice to God. When Samuel arrives at Bethlehem, the elders are concerned about why he's there. And they're like, they ask him, "Are you coming here peaceably?" Because the last time he was out, he pretended he was cool and then he cut a man into pieces. So people are just making sure that Samuel's in a good mood today. And he says, "Yes, I'm here peaceably to make a sacrifice to God." And he tells Jesse and his sons to come to the sacrifice. In verse 6, Samuel assumes his private thoughts. Okay, Samuel assumes in his, I got lost again. Samuel assumes in his private thoughts that Jesse's son Eliab would be the king that God selects. In verse 7, God says no. After verifying that none of Jesse's sons are God's chosen, Samuel tells Jesse to bring his youngest son that cared for sheep. When we get to verses 12 and 13, Jesse's son's appearance, we know his name is David, but his appearance is mentioned before anything else about him. So this is a pattern of detail that we saw in 1 Samuel 8, verses 5 and 20, of Israel being concerned with being like the nations around them. We also see in 1 Samuel chapter 9, when Saul is mentioned and selected, his height and his appearance were uh, introduced before he was introduced. So, just a pattern that we're seeing now that Israel wants their leadership to reflect the people around them. Verse 12, Jesse's son is described as being ruddy or reddish in color, having a good attitude, and being good to look at. And God confirms this son is Israel's new king. Verse 1, the term king was used. So we don't see him being called king again, just saying, "Anoint him, for this is he." 14 is a new event. So this is talking about Saul. God departed from him, and an evil spirit from God troubled him. Saul's servants suggest employing a harp player, and he agrees. Saul's servants tell Jesse that they would like David to play the harp for Saul because David has a reputation for being really good with the harp. And so he has a good reputation where he lives. You know, he's a man of war, he's prudent, he's a man of good presence, God is with him, and he's good at the harp. So he gets hired for the job. Verse 20, his father Jesse sends a goat with gifts for David to take to King Saul, and David becomes Saul's well-loved armor bearer and or personal assistant. Verse 23, David played the harp when the evil spirit was on Saul and it left. So that's what we have for 1 Samuel chapter 16. I feel much better about this, and thank you for watching the video. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Have a wonderful day.